Hey guys, so I'm gonna teach you about error handling in Java, which is also called exception handling. So basically, an error is an exception in Java. And as you can see here, I had to your right hand side, I had this program where I declared int num0, int num1 is equal to 0, and int num2 is equal to 10. And then I tried to divide those numbers and print them out, but then the program gave me this error to my right-hand side saying that you cannot divide by 0, because in mathematics, dividing by 0 is no-go, right? So exception handling, what we're basically doing is we use these try and catch, right? So that when an error happens, the user can get a more descriptive message. Because in most cases, if a user gets this error right here, they'll just be like, what the hell, right? So this is how we do error handling. You declare try, and then a catch, right? And then you put the the program of which is possibly going to run into an error and put it in here, right, within the try. So you're going to try to run this program, and then you catch the error down here. It's giving me an error, this squiggly line, because I did not specify what kind of error I want to catch, right? So I'm just going to say exception E, and then right here I'm going to say print error happened. And then there, I'm going to print the actual error that happened. Right. So if I run this, you see on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, sorry, it's giving me that error happened and then the actual error that happened. But still, this is not that descriptive, so I can just actually make it more descriptive to say that error happened. You cannot divide by 0, and then save that and run it. So now we're getting a much more descriptive error for the user to actually see, to say that error happened, you cannot divide by 0. All right. So remember that in error handling, you have this try and then this catch. And then let me just explain a little bit more about what that means. This try again is where you put the code of which may or may not run into an error. In this case, we actually know that it's going to run into an error because we're trying to divide by 0. And then in here, in the catch, we try to catch whatever error happens up here, right? And the other thing about error handling is you can put any kind of, rather, you can put as many catches as you can according to the error that you want to catch, because they can be, just going to put a comment there to say that you can catch more than one error, right? But this is just a general exception. So it's going to catch any kind of error. So I'm just going to generate another kind of error. So I'm going to comment this out because I have to leave the code online for you guys to try out. So in here, I'm going to say, I'm going to declare the scanner class so that we can enter values via, that's a nice class again. INP is equal to new scanner. And mind you, when you're declaring the scanner class, you have to import it up here. I didn't have to import it because it did that. NetBeans did that automatically for me. Then dot in, and then terminate that. And then I'm gonna say int num is equal to inp dot next int, right? And let me just put a message up there to say please enter a number. Control S. Now, if I run that, and then right there, it's going to tell me, please enter a number. But if I enter a name, say Jane, and then bam, you see, it's printing an error. Of course, it's saying cannot divide by 0 because that's the error we taught it to print. But if I tell it, just going to delete that, and then plus E, which is the error right here, which is going to happen. So if I save that, and then run the program again, please enter a number, and then I enter Jane again here. It said input mismatch exception, right? So there are a lot of kind of errors that we can have. The other one is going to declare an integer numbers is equal to. This is going to be an array. So numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and then terminate that. And then I tell it to print out. So if you remember, in arrays, right, we reference the array value by its index, right? So here I'm going to say numbers, and right there I'm going to point to index 7, right? And we can see right here that these values, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, which means that there's 3 indexes starting from 0 up to 3, right? But I'm trying to reference index 7, which actually doesn't exist. And when I run that, it's going to say that array index out of bounds exception, which is 7, right? So there are so many kinds of errors. So now I'm going to teach you how to actually catch those errors specifically, right? So you can catch specific errors. I'll comment that out. So right here, exceptions means that it's a general error. It's going to catch any kind of error that happens. But in here, when I put to say array index out of bounds exception, and don't worry, you don't have to memorize most of these things if you're using NetBeans. Once you start the beginning part and press Control Space, it's going to give you a list of those things. Even just at the beginning here, if I press Control Space, most of these are all the errors that I can catch within NetBeans, or within Java rather. And then I still have to give it that variable here because I'll need to print whatever's happening here. Okay, so Control Space. And then remember, I can catch more than one error. So Control C, Control V. I have to remove this because I can't catch the same error twice. So the next one, I'm going to say input mismatch. Yeah, I forgot what that error is. Just going to have to look for it. Can't believe I forgot. Let's try again. Do we have that here? No. Okay, tell you what, I'm just gonna catch that error again and see what error it gives me. So I'm gonna comment this out. So that it gives me that error, so that I catch it specifically. I've just forgotten what it means. Okay, I'm gonna enter some strings in there, and then input mismatch. I don't know what is not in there. I'm gonna copy that, gonna paste it in there. Oh, there you go. Input mismatch exception. What did I do? There you go. And then uncomment that. And then uncomment that. And comment this. And then and then paste that there. And then down here, this is an exception. So what's happening here is that I'm catching the array index out of bounds exception, and down here, this part, I'm catching the input mismatch exception, and down here, I'm just catching any other error, right? So error index out of bounds, and here, input mismatch. And then here, I'll just leave it like that to say that any general error that happens of which I don't know, or maybe it doesn't exist within the list, then I can catch it anywhere in here. Okay. Oh, that was that error right there. Anyhow, so if I run this program, right, it's going to give me this one because the arithmetic exception, because I tried to divide by 0, which was this first part, it's not catching any of these because as soon as it got to this line right here, it broke and nothing else down here was able to run, right? So it arrived at this exception catch, right? And then if I comment this out and run the program again, please enter a number. I'm going to enter some strings in there. Mind you, I'm entering strings, but I told it that it's going to receive an integer. So that's why it's throwing out that error. So input mismatch exception, right? So I was printing this input mismatch, which was those two first words right there. If I delete that, because we don't need it to print anything else, which is bizarre to a user. So yeah, it's giving me that input mismatch exception because I'm trying to enter a string instead of a number, which it was expecting right there. So if I run that again and enter a number, which is 3, that's a number, and then enter, see, that error in this error input mismatch was not caught because I actually entered a number, and then it went on to catch the array index out of bounds because of this line right here. Okay. So just a quick catch up. So exceptions are errors that happen in a program either before or during run time. Right? And then you use or try and catch to handle the errors so that you can print a more specific and descriptive error to the user. Don't worry about most of this. I'll put the code online so you can download it. All right. And then there's also what we call a finally, right? Spelled finally block, right? So what this thing does is, even if an error happens in here, the finally block is always going to run. So the finally block, yeah, always runs even when an error happens. I'm going to comment that out. So remember that when I left this uncommented, right? When an error happens in here, we were not seeing any other errors that were happening because of these things down here. Why? Because once an error happens, the program stops, and then it prints you out that error that has happened, and then nothing else happens. But in the finally block, I'm just going to print out to say this is the finally block. And then I'm going to save that and run it. You see, an error happened right there. An error happened, but then the finally block also printed out, right? So even when an error happens up here, the finally block is always going to print, right? The finally block is always going to print, regardless of whether or not an error happened. So that's error handling, right? So when an error happens, you put the code in which the error may or may not happen within the try block, and then you put the catch as to catch either a specific error, in this case, which is I'm just gonna control space, and then either one of these errors down here, right? Except these things down here, which is Java or blah blah blah. So these errors up here. So you can put them to say you're going to catch this specific error. But if you don't know what error you're going to be catching, you just put exception and then a variable there that you're going to print out, and then print it out here, right? So that's your error handling. And remember that when you're putting your try catches, you make sure that the exception, the general error catcher, which is just exception, you put it at the end before you put any one of these specific error catches. And then you can put the finally block, or you can choose not to put it. It doesn't really matter. And yeah, that's error handling, which is provided by Java.